Welcome to Girls Who Talk Goals. I'm Kristy.
I'm Natalie.
And I'm Emilie.
We are creating an empowering community where we inspire each other to step out of our comfort zones
and fill each other's cups one conversation at a time.
We're all just trying to figure out life, so let's go on this journey together.
Let's jump into today's episode. Welcome back, everybody. Today's mantra is why we judge a book by its cover. We are going to be discussing what it means when you are labeled and just the connotations we have surrounding that topic.
I am very guilty of this. In fact, I was just at a real estate conference this weekend in South Carolina, and I remember we were like in the main hall and these girls came in and they were a little bit late. We had already like taken our seats and we were listening to the speaker talk. They walked in. They were pretty bougie and they walked in like they owned the place. And I'm like, wait, who are you to be walking in here with like so much confidence? And I don't know. Well, it turns out you have all of these like little breakout sessions that are like an hour long. One of the breakout sessions that I signed up for, coincidentally enough, they were leading, and oh my gosh, they were amazing and inspired me so much, gave me so many good ideas for my business, and just had a lot of valuable insights, advice, and honestly, they're really fantastic at what they do. And we're able to share a lot of their stories and like how, I can better serve the people in my life and my clients at the same time. But when they walked in, I immediately was like, oh, don't know about them because they're walking in here like they own it. But then I got to know them and I spoke with them and I was like, okay, how can I have more conversations with you? Yeah, because I'm like, I need to be more like you, which they have a like conference, I think in October in Texas, and I want to sign up for it now. Because I'm like, I need to be spending more time with you so I can be more like you. But that wasn't my first initial thought when they walked in.
Yeah. Right. Your first thought was just to judge them, essentially, because they were wearing nicer clothes or nicer items. And so I feel like that automatically has a negative connotation with that. Of like, oh, like who do you think you are?
Right. Like, do you deserve to have all of that?
Right. Or like you said, they're walking in there like they own the place. So you're like, who do you think you are? But then you get to know somebody.
I don't view it like that. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're so successful.
I view it a few different ways, like I mentioned, and then I see your side of that, but then I'm like, why is that not me? And then I go a little bit more negative with it. And then when I met them, I was like, oh my gosh.
Which I think that touches on just the other episode that I think is already aired, of thinking the positive thoughts and how we automatically think of the negative ones. Because my automatic reaction is like, oh my gosh, so positive. Like, I want to be around them. They obviously are successful or something. And that's so crazy that you say that. That's interesting. What are some labels that people put on you guys? Because I know for myself, people label you just by your job. If you're in an interview, like Emilie said just a bit ago, when we were talking before the episode, of people will ask, oh, what do you do? And it's always, what do you do for work? People are meaning because you're labeled by your work.
Or they ask you, who are you?
Who are you?
Yeah, they say, who are you? Like, tell me about yourself. And you automatically go, well, I'm a realtor. And they're like, yeah, but like, what else? That's the first thing that you do. You identify yourself as your career. But why? Because that shouldn't be your life. Unless you love your job. But
which we all do. We're more than that.
Right. But you were so much more than your job.
But a lot of people don't know what to say to that because you always say your job. You always say, I'm a wife, I'm a mom.
It's the easiest thing.
Yeah. Nobody ever really takes the time to think of like, wait, who am I actually without all of this other stuff? And if you think about that, it's honestly really deep.
It is.
Honestly, what I just thought about is whenever somebody dies in their obituary or on their gravestone, it says like father, brother, uncle, or like wife, mom, grandma, something like that. But it's like, again, those labels, and it's like that's all they were. I know you can't write.
I think that's so, but like at the end of, I feel like it's a growth thing, because when you're younger, when you think of these topics, we don't like to be labeled as mom or wife or whatever you are. But then as you grow older, it's almost like people come back to their hometown, like, because you're more grateful because it's like, oh no, actually the most important thing I do is being a mom. And so it gets more, as you get older, you kind of reflect. I think we're just in a different time in our lives where we don't want to be labeled as those things. But when we're 70, 80, it's like, that's actually the most important label to me. But it's just so interesting of different, how you grow into the labels, I think.
I agree, because I don't want to just be a wife, a
You want to be
daughter.
all of it.
Yeah. And I don't know. I want to just bring more to the table. I don't know. And like be more valuable than just those things. Like, who is Kristy to her core?
It's so hard to say that though in an interview setting or something.
Oh my gosh,
because
yeah.
people, do they really want to know that long answer? Do they actually care? Or are they just asking you, oh, what do you do? Because they're being polite. Like, let's be real.
I think that's so true. And I feel like that's why we don't go there. Because
agree.
it's like, you know, I could try to go there with you, but odds are you don't really care and you don't want to listen to what I'm saying. So it's harder to find people to have that conversation with to figure out who you are.
Right. Or people who see who you are and they know who you are beyond that label.
Right.
I have a quote here, and it's Taylor Swift, and I know that might be stupid, but with the release of the new album and everything, I actually really like how she labels, or how she says this about her labeling her music. And I think it fits for this episode. She says, I leave the genre labeling to other people. I really do. If I were to think too hard about it, that would stifle you creatively. If you think too hard about who other people want you to be as an artist, it stops you from being who you want to be as an artist. And I actually think that's really true, because with her doing different genres and everything, it's like, can't artists be artists?
I love that.
I
Or
do
just
too.
like thinking about that as in your life. That was the first time I had heard that or read that.
I know. I just saw it literally a couple days ago as we were prepping for this episode.
But I think that's so true. And even that just goes back to what society wants you to be. So like in our age group, like usually people are like, oh, you know, like when you're getting married, when you're having kids, like they're almost like forcing a label upon you. But it's like, what if I don't want those things? Or what if I don't fit into that label? Or what if I want to go do X, Y, and Z, you know? So that's really interesting.
I know. I had to think about it a little bit.
Yeah.
As I'm like, that's so true. And then I think about, obviously pertain it to your own life and everything and reflect upon it. And I've been getting, not heat, but just questions between other realtors or even family members who maybe don't understand the process. But since I've become a realtor, people are like, oh, like that's so crazy. I thought you loved being an appraiser. Like, I don't understand. Why are you quitting that? And I'm like, I'm not. And they don't understand. They can't grasp the idea of doing multiple things, especially being a podcaster or like blogger or whatever. Put that on top of that. But just, you don't have to be one thing.
No, you can be as many things as you want to be, but we are also guilty of doing that. Like, we just stick the one thing on somebody. Oh, well, she's a mom. Oh, well, she's a wife, you know? That's who you associate, or that's how you deem some people.
I think moms especially. Obviously, we're not mothers yet, but just hearing other moms talk, or friends, or, you know, my mom or sister-in-laws or anything, that's their label. And of course, their world revolves around their children. But it's so crazy reflecting on me and my relationship with my mom. Like, she had a whole other life before me. She's also her own person. And it's just crazy to think about that.
Right. And I think that goes along with, like you said, becoming a mom or becoming a wife, and how you had talked about how you almost like, you felt like you lost who you were a little bit when you did get married.
Yeah.
And almost like how you like lost a little bit of the sense of your identity.
And it's hard to talk about, because like, I guess I'm still trying to fully like understand that and get a grasp, I guess, of who I am today, which is very deep to say. But, you know, things do happen and different people come into your life, and I got married young and it changed like the course that I was on. And I'm still in a good place, but I am trying to figure myself out more.
Right. And who you are outside of your marriage.
Right. Yeah.
And you'll never have it figured out. It's an ever-growing process. But I do think it's intense when you got married so young that you're figuring it out now.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think I have a relationship anxiety of like, scared because I come from parents who are divorced or whatever. Just the idea of a relationship in the future, it probably scares me, probably more so than I care to admit.
Yeah.
Probably need therapy for that, but
It's okay. We all need therapy.
It's expensive though.
it's expensive.
That's why
But
you have
yeah.
friends.
That's why you
Right.
have friends.
Free therapy.
But yeah, it's almost like you're scared of losing yourself or becoming a mom. And that might be a reason why so many young people are waiting to get married or to have children, because women are more in the workforce now or doing their own thing, traveling, and maybe that's a reason why.
Which I love that like that has shifted, you know? Everyone used to be like so young when they did all of those things. And I know I got
So
married
young.
young, but like I'm living my best life until I decide that I want to start the next chapter. So,
Yeah. Just playing a little bit of devil's advocate a little bit, because labeling, it doesn't have to be such a bad connotation to it. I don't think labeling helps us compartmentalize people and situations, and it's almost a storing mechanism for us all. And if you think of putting away books in a library, every book has its slot, and if they were all just on the ground open, it would be so messy inside our brains. So thinking others will without a doubt be labeling you. It only makes sense. Like, oh, I'm going to Emilie because she's my realtor. Like, they're not going to think of everything Emilie is, because we want to make it easy for us to do so,
mm-hmm.
to label others. That's literally just natural, in my opinion, for us to do so. But what makes it dangerous is when we accept their label on us. And when we only think of ourselves as that one label, then I think that can have negative connotations on us directly.
Because you want to be more than that.
Yeah.
And once you accept that label as yourself, like, oh, I'm only a realtor, then it's like you base your entire life around that.
Yeah.
And you feel like you can't be more, do more.
I agree. I don't think it's as dangerous of other people putting labels on others.
Right.
It's just when you accept their labels, essentially.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I will say, for me, I think it's not dangerous, but I've noticed that me labeling other people, like especially other realtors,
Mhm.
you know, I completely forget that they have lives too. Even though obviously I'm a realtor and I
Yeah.
have a lot of life outside of work. But it's not until like recently I met another realtor, and she also has a podcast, like all these things. And like it literally, I took a step back and I was like, wow, like she has a life too. And she's not just a realtor.
She does other things than just sell houses? No way.
Right. I know, but
That is hard.
that happens to me all the time. I just forget that people actually have lives outside of their careers,
Mm-hmm.
outside of their labels.
Mm-hmm. And I think it almost stems from high school. I think that's when we first start labeling people.
Yeah. Everybody's got their own little crowd, their own lunch table that they sit with.
Flicks.
This is who, this is who, this is who.
Mm-hmm.
That is where it begins. You are very true.
Yeah, and like you said, it starts young. You know, you're like, oh, well, that kid's weird, or that kid's a nerd, or that kid's smart, or that one's popular, that one's mean, just like all these things, or that one plays, you know, sports.
Yeah.
And then for me, I know I'm guilty of it, but like back then you place those labels like mentally. And then you remember those people even as you go through life and we grow up. And that's like still what I think of them as until like maybe I reconnect with somebody or like run into them and I talk to them and I'm like, oh my God, you're so different than what I remember you as. And then that label almost goes away, if that makes sense. But until then, that's what they are in my mind.
You never
Not
forget.
that that's a bad thing or a good thing, but
Yeah, it could be good or bad.
right.
Yeah. Until you have another relationship with them or encounter with them. That's all that sticks in your head. And it could be good or bad.
I know. It's a little scary to think about.
I know. You're like, oh, shoot, what did I do in high school?
I'm like,
Luckily, I did nothing.
what did people label me as? I don't actually want to know.
Yeah, actually, don't tell me.
Yeah.
Don't tell me.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with the high school labeling. And there was this quote. It was, the moment you label someone, you limit yourself from truly understanding them.
I love that.
And I think that's just, you don't need to expand on that. I mean, it's so accurate. It's very true. And I think we just do that because it's easy to day-to-day life.
It is, but that also goes with judging someone too, whenever you meet them. Kind of like as we and what we started this podcast with, of you see somebody like Kristy, you saw those realtors who were dressed really nice and bougie, and you were like, wow. You know, almost not a negative or a positive thing, but most of the time I feel like it's negative because that's just what we do.
That's you think of negative first.
Right. Like I know for me, it's like if I'm in the gym and I see another girl who's like super fit, super pretty or something, my first thing is like almost negative on myself, or like why don't I look like her, or like why.
Yes, that's how I feel too. I feel like with those women, and same thing at the gym. Like it's always like there's always going to be somebody who's better than you, who's prettier than you, who has this going on for them, who makes more money than you. But like it matters at the end of the day, like how happy you are with yourself.
But I feel like that's a reflection on how you judge somebody.
Yes.
So like if your first thought is negative, it's like, is that how you talk to yourself? But if you see somebody and your first thought is positive, then I feel like you have a more positive outlook on yourself, if that makes sense. It's always a projection.
I agree.
Of your inner self.
I'm guilty. We need to work.
Oh yeah,
we all are on those negative thoughts.
Yes, yeah. It's so difficult though.
I definitely think if you're judging, I think it's a projection of what you're feeling on the inside. I definitely think that's accurate. And if you're also judging and putting a label on somebody, and you're putting other labels on yourself that maybe other people are putting on you, or you're just putting on yourself, that's a glass ceiling that you're putting on yourself. And it hinders you.
You know, I think about my life and how I want to do so many different things. I don't want to go through my life and be like, yeah, I've been a realtor for 50 years, you know, and that's all I've done. Hopefully I'm still doing it in 50 years, but I also want to be so many other things because I want to experience all these other things. And so I can't just label myself as a realtor, because then like that's all I have, that glass ceiling, like you just said. But I want to do so many other things. I want to have all the labels I can.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, labels.
Yes.
It gets also hard though, because if you're putting all these labels, like, okay, I'm an appraiser, realtor, podcaster, blah, blah, blah.
Dog mom, most important.
Love you, Bailey.
Shout out
Bailey, who's not listening to this. But when you put all these labels on yourself, it's almost a form of imposter syndrome, like a tiny bit, because if you're putting all these labels on yourself, it's like, oh, you're not giving all your effort into every single one of those. The more labels you have, it's a good thing, but it can also, in your brain, be like, wait, how can I do all of these effectively?
Right. Or like, I'm not capable of doing all these things.
Yeah. Or like, do I really do all these things? Like, really? It's almost in our brain, we try to focus just on one thing.
Yeah. And then I almost feel guilty for being involved in so many things. I feel guilty that I am a realtor. I feel guilty that I coach a couple volleyball teams. I feel guilty that I have a podcast. I feel guilty that I have investment properties. And then I'm a wife. And that's like 5 things. So really, that's not a lot. And I'm allowed to be all of those things. But I do think we look at it the wrong way.
I do too.
I want to have my hand in as many pots as possible.
Yeah.
I
agree.
Yeah, it's just crazy. And I'm sure many people can relate to that.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because like when I do get involved in a few things, I'm like, well, I'm really stretching myself.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be doing all of this. But like, it's also okay if all of those things make me happy and, you know, I can commit to doing them, you know, to the best that I can, then it's okay.
Yeah, for sure.
So to recap, we hope that you reflect a little bit on this episode and know that you can have as many labels on yourself as you want. And, you know, to give a little bit of grace too when we're like looking at other people and not just seeing the one thing about them, and remembering that, you know, people can be involved in as many things as they want to be and be whoever they want to be. They don't just have to be, you know, the one category that we think that they are.
Yeah. And just to be cautious and conscious of what you're labeling other people as, but also what labels you are putting on yourself that are maybe unnecessary, that might be hindering you and your potential.
And don't create that glass ceiling for yourself. And know that you can You can have as many labels as you want and have your hand in as many pots as you want.
Amen.
Yes.
So have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks for listening.